My name is Emily Turner, and I'm 28 years old. I've been working as a waitress at Lorraine's Bistro for the past 2 years, trying to juggle my job with my graduate studies in art history. It's not the life I imagined for myself when I first decided to pursue a career in the arts, but it's the one I've got for now. The bistro, though charming and cozy, is far from glamorous. I spend my nights serving overpriced meals to wealthy patrons who likely have no idea what it's like to work paycheck to paycheck. Meanwhile, I'm just trying to make enough money to cover rent, utilities, and textbooks. During the day, I'm buried in books about medieval manuscripts, ancient art, and the complexities of art forgery, studying hard to get my master's degree. But no matter how much I learn, no matter how many hours I spend in the library, it doesn't change the reality of my financial situation. I live a life split between two worlds, the one I'm working toward in my academic career, and the one I live in when I slip on my apron and serve customers their meals. The contrast is stark. My dreams of researching historical artifacts and curating exhibitions feel worlds away from the cramped, low-ceilinged kitchen and the bustling dining area of the bistro. The patrons don't look at me like I'm anything special. They don't see a future art expert. They see a waitress. But I keep going. For all the frustrations and exhaustion, the dream is still alive in me. Every time I walk into the library, every time I finish another chapter of my thesis, I remind myself that this is just a step, a hard step, but a step towards something bigger. The tension between the two parts of my life has never been clearer than one Tuesday evening, when I was just finishing up with a table and cleaning up after a rush. Alex, my manager, pulled me aside, his face unusually serious. "Emily, I need you to handle the private dining room tonight," he said. His voice was tense, unlike the usual easygoing way he managed things. "We've got a VIP client, and everything needs to be perfect. This is a big deal, so don't mess it up." I swallowed hard, my stomach sinking. Private dining meant extra hours, which I had no problem with, but I also had a paper on art forgery due the next morning, something I couldn't afford to push aside. But I couldn't say no. "Of course, Alex," I said, trying to hide the worry in my voice. He gave me a quick nod and then added, "This guy could change our fortunes, Emily. If you screw up, we're all done here." I nodded again, trying to steady my nerves. As I walked to the back room to get ready, my mind raced. I tried to shake off the unease creeping up on me. Tonight, this dinner, had to go perfectly. I quickly checked my reflection in the hallway mirror, adjusting my apron and smoothing down my hair. I had to look presentable, professional, even if I was feeling anything but. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. I couldn't afford to let nerves get in the way. This was my shot, my chance to make a lasting impression. I'd been waiting for something big to happen, and now it was here. The private dining room at Lorraine's was small but elegant, a space that exuded a quiet sort of luxury. It had dark oak paneling and soft lighting, with a few antique pieces of furniture scattered around. It felt more like a private club than a restaurant, the kind of place where important conversations happened, and tonight was no exception. As I stepped into the room to check the table settings, I immediately noticed the guests. 3 men were already seated, all in sharp, expensive suits, talking quietly among themselves. They were the kind of people who commanded attention without saying a word, with an air of exclusivity that made the room feel smaller. But it was the 4th man who really caught my eye. John Prescott. The name alone sent a shiver down my spine. At 50, Prescott was one of the most well-known and influential art collectors in the world. His collection was legendary, and his reputation in the art community was unmatched. He wasn't just rich, he was a titan in the art world, and if anyone had the power to change my life, it was him. As he sat there, looking every bit the part of a powerful billionaire, his neatly combed silver hair and sharp, calculating eyes made him seem almost untouchable. I couldn't help but feel a little starstruck. I'd read about him in art journals, heard whispers about his private collection, but now, here he was, sitting in front of me. "Good evening, gentlemen," I said, trying to mask my nerves. "I'm Emily, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." I tried to sound confident, but my voice trembled slightly. Prescott looked up from the leather portfolio he'd been studying and gave me a brief, appraising look. His eyes were intense, sharp, like he could see right through me. Thank you, Emily, he replied, his voice calm and composed. We'll be discussing some business during dinner, so feel free to give us extra time between courses. Of course, Mr. Prescott, I said, nodding as I forced myself to meet his gaze. I was trying to project an air of calm, but inside, my heart was racing. It wasn't every day you waited on one of the most powerful men in the art world. As I served the first course, I couldn't help but overhear their conversation. They were talking about an ancient manuscript, one that, according to them, had been authenticated by experts and traced back to a long-lost royal library. They spoke about it reverently, almost as if it were sacred. Have the experts confirmed the provenance? Prescott asked, his voice low and commanding. Yes, Mr. Prescott, one of the dealers answered. The authentication is flawless. We've confirmed its history through multiple collections. A sudden chill ran through me. The Royal Codex of Eldora, I'd read about it in my studies. It was a legendary 12th century manuscript that had been lost for centuries. If this was real, it was worth more than I could even fathom. But something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong. When the dealer opened a case and revealed the manuscript, I froze. The manuscript in front of me was stunning. The gold leaf glittered in the soft light, and the designs on the pages were intricate and breathtaking. But the more I looked at it, the more something didn't sit right. The details were too perfect. It was almost as if the manuscript had been made to look old, as if it were trying too hard to be real. My heart sank. This was no ancient artifact. It was a fake. As I continued to serve the table, I couldn't stop thinking about the manuscript. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that something wasn't right. I had studied art forgery in my graduate program, and my grandfather, who was a renowned art historian, had spent his career researching the methods used by forgers. He'd taught me to notice the smallest of details, the subtle inconsistencies that most people would overlook. And as I looked at the manuscript, I could see the unmistakable signs of a fake. The gold leaf was too uniform, the ink too vibrant, and the calligraphy, well, it was flawless, far too perfect for something that was supposedly centuries old. It screamed modern reproduction. I tried to push the thought out of my head. After all, I was just a waitress. What did I know about authenticating manuscripts? But the longer I stood there, the more certain I became. I had seen this before in my grandfather's notes, the same kind of perfect imperfections that forgers like Victor Fall were known for. It was almost as if the manuscript was taunting me, daring me to speak up. But what could I say? I was just a waitress serving food to a room full of powerful men. Who would listen to me? Still, the thought of a forgery being sold for millions made my stomach churn. The world of art, the one I was trying to break into, was so often about appearances. So many people in the industry only cared about the price tag, the prestige, the history that came with a work of art. But I had been taught differently. To me, art was more than just a commodity. It was about truth, about preserving history and honoring the work of those who came before us. And I couldn't stand by and watch something as important as a manuscript, one that might hold centuries of history, be sold for millions as a lie. The pressure was overwhelming. I stood in the corner of the room, my hands trembling as I refilled wine glasses and cleared empty plates. The men at the table were so engrossed in their conversation that they didn't notice the storm of doubt and fear raging inside me. What if I'm wrong? I kept asking myself. What if they laugh at me? What if I lose my job? I glanced back at Prescott, who was leaning over the manuscript, studying it intently. He seemed so sure of its authenticity. But I knew, deep down, that I couldn't let this go. I had to say something, even if it meant risking everything. I thought about my grandfather again, about how he had fought so hard to expose forgeries and protect the integrity of art. If I didn't speak up, I would be dishonoring his legacy. I took a deep breath, gathered all the courage I could muster, and made my decision. I had to say something. I couldn't let this fraud slip through the cracks. I walked over to the table, my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached the side of the room, I hesitated for just a moment before I finally spoke. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned toward me. Prescott's gaze, sharp and calculating, locked onto mine. "But I believe that manuscript is a forgery. The words hung in the air like a bombshell. I could feel the weight of their disbelief before they even spoke. The silence that followed my words felt like it stretched for eternity. I could feel all their eyes on me. 3 men in sharp suits, their expressions a mix of surprise and disbelief, and Prescott, whose gaze was calculating, sharp, like he was trying to figure me out. I could already sense the tension in the room thickening. What had I just done? My heart was pounding in my chest, and my palms felt clammy as I stood frozen in place, unsure of what would happen next. One of the dealers, a man with a dark beard and a voice as smooth as velvet, laughed. It was a low, dismissive chuckle, as if I had made some kind of ridiculous joke. "Excuse me?" he asked, raising an eyebrow, his tone mocking. "You're interrupting our business to tell us this is a forgery?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could feel it trembling, betraying my nerves. "I know it's a forgery. I'm sorry, but it's the work of Victor Fall," I said. My words rushed now, though still firm. "The gold leaf is too perfect, the ink is too bright, and the calligraphy is flawless in a way that no medieval scribe could ever achieve. It's a modern reproduction, and I'm sure of it." I could see Prescott's eyes narrowing. He wasn't laughing. Instead, he was studying me closely, his gaze sharp and intense, as if he was weighing whether I was a threat or just some overzealous student who didn't know what she was talking about. The other dealer, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, looked downright furious. "Who are you to make such a claim?" he snapped, his voice rising. "You're a waitress? What makes you think you know anything about authenticating an ancient manuscript?" The weight of his words landed heavily on me, and for a split second, I wondered if I had overstepped. But then I remembered why I was doing this. The history, the truth, my grandfather. He had spent years researching forgeries like this, his life ruined by men like Victor Fall, who made a mockery of the art world. My grandfather had been right all along, and now I had a chance to prove it. I couldn't back down. "My grandfather was Dr. Edmund Turner," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. "He was an expert in art forgeries. He dedicated his life to exposing forgers like Fall. His work was dismissed, but I've studied his research and I know what I'm talking about. I recognize Fall's techniques." There was a flicker of recognition in Prescott's eyes. I saw it, just for a moment. The dealers seemed to hesitate for a split second, too, as if they were unsure of how to react. Prescott, ever the calm figure, leaned forward slightly, his eyes still locked on mine. He didn't speak right away, but his silence felt heavier than any words. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter but still commanding. "And what makes you so sure?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. I took a breath, gathering my thoughts, trying to focus. "I've studied forgeries like this one. The gold leaf is too even. Medieval scribes never worked with such perfect consistency. And look at the ink. No 12th century scribe would have access to this kind of vibrant pigment. It's too modern. And the calligraphy, it's too uniform, too flawless. Scribes from that era made tiny errors. There's no human imperfection in this. It's perfect, and that's exactly how Fall works. He makes everything seem ideal, even when it's not." I paused, feeling the weight of my words settle in the room. Prescott didn't say anything at first. He just studied the manuscript again. Then slowly, he turned his gaze back to me. "These are very specific observations," he said, his voice low but thoughtful. "How do you know so much about Victor Fall's methods?" I hesitated only for a moment before answering. "Because my grandfather spent the last years of his life studying him. I've inherited his research, his notes. I've been studying forgeries my whole life. I've been taught to see what others miss." I watched Prescott's face as he processed my words. His gaze softened slightly, and for the first time since I had spoken up, I saw a glimmer of respect in his eyes. He glanced at the manuscript again, then back at me. After a long pause, he gave a small nod. "I see," he said, his voice steady. "I'll have this manuscript re-examined. If what you say is true, you've just saved me from making a very costly mistake." My breath caught in my throat, and I could hardly believe what I was hearing. He wasn't dismissing me. He was listening. The next few days were a whirlwind of uncertainty and anticipation. I kept replaying the scene in my head. How I had interrupted that dinner, how I had dared to challenge Prescott and the dealers, and how they had actually listened. But even though Prescott had said he'd have the manuscript re-examined, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just put my entire future on the line. I hadn't been wrong, but what if they found a way to dismiss me, to make my claims seem like nothing more than the ramblings of an overzealous graduate student? What if I had ruined any chance I ever had at building a career in the art world? 3 days passed, and I couldn't focus on anything else. I barely managed to keep up with my schoolwork, the stress of the situation eating away at my concentration. I kept checking my phone, waiting for some kind of confirmation, but nothing came. Then, on the evening of the third day, I received a call from an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat when I saw it was from Prescott. Emily? His voice was calm, but I could hear the underlying tension. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow. Can you come by my office? I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. This was it. The moment that would either make or break everything. Of course, Mr. Prescott, I said, my voice betraying a hint of the nerves I was trying to keep in check. What time? 11 a.m. I'll see you then. The next morning, I woke up early, pacing around my apartment as I tried to shake off my nerves. The sun was barely up, but it felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for me to find out what would happen next. I quickly dressed in the most professional outfit I could put together, a simple black dress with a cardigan, and tried to pull myself together. I hadn't imagined myself in a situation like this, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what awaited me. But one thing was clear. I couldn't back down now. When I arrived at Prescott's office, I was greeted by his assistant, a polite woman who led me into a sleek, modern conference room. The walls were lined with art that must have been worth more than I would ever make in my lifetime, and the whole place had an air of quiet power, as though everything here had been carefully curated for its impact. Prescott was sitting at the head of the table, and across from him were two other men, both looking at me expectantly. "Emily, thank you for coming," Prescott said as I took a seat. His voice was calm, but his eyes, those piercing eyes, were studying me. "We've examined the manuscript, and I wanted to bring you in to discuss the findings." My heart skipped. The manuscript, it was real, or it wasn't. It was my moment to prove I wasn't wrong. "The tests were thorough, Prescott continued, "and I'm afraid you were right. The manuscript is a forgery." I felt a strange mix of relief and disbelief wash over me. I had known it, but hearing him say the words out loud made it real. "I'm glad the tests confirmed it," I said quietly, trying to keep my emotions in check. I just couldn't stand by and let that happen. Prescott gave me a sharp nod. "You've saved me a great deal of money, Emily, and for that I owe you more than just thanks." I wasn't sure where he was going with this, but I could feel the weight of the moment. "I want to offer you a position with my team," he said, his voice steady but serious. "As an authentication specialist for my collection, I'm willing to pay for your graduate tuition, and I'm offering you a salary of $80,000 a year to start." I froze. Was this real? I had come here expecting to either be dismissed or given a polite thank you for my trouble. But this was something entirely different. "Wait," I said, unable to fully comprehend what he was saying. "You're offering me a job?" Prescott smiled slightly. "Yes, you've proven your knowledge and expertise in a way that many of the so-called experts in this field could not. You've demonstrated more than just theoretical knowledge. You've shown that you have the instinct and passion necessary to succeed. This is a rare opportunity, Emily." I felt the weight of his words sink in, but the real impact didn't hit me until later. Long after the meeting ended and I was sitting in my apartment, the contract in my hands, realizing that everything had changed. My life, my career, everything I had been working for, it had all suddenly shifted. It was as though I had stepped through a door I didn't even know existed, into a future I had never dared to dream of. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I couldn't believe how quickly everything had changed. One minute, I was a struggling waitress, trying to make ends meet while scraping together enough time to study. The next, I was working alongside some of the most respected people in the art world, handling priceless artifacts, reviewing authenticating documents, and learning from the best. Prescott's office was nothing like I had imagined. It was more than just a space. It was a showcase of art history, filled with rare paintings, sculptures, and manuscripts that most people only saw in books or museums. I found myself walking through it every day, overwhelmed by the sheer beauty and value of everything around me. The work was intense, but it was exactly what I had always dreamed of. Each day, I spent hours carefully examining pieces in Prescott's collection, looking for inconsistencies or signs of forgery. It was a lot of pressure, but it was also thrilling. I was doing what my grandfather had dedicated his life to, fighting against forgers who sought to destroy the authenticity of art. I thought about him constantly. He had passed away years ago, but his influence still guided me. Every time I looked at a manuscript, I asked myself, what would Grandpa see? The research he had left behind became my map through this new world, and it gave me the confidence I needed when I found myself unsure. It wasn't just the work that was rewarding, it was the recognition. I'd always felt like an outsider in the art world, someone on the periphery, looking in, hoping to one day belong. Now, as Prescott's team welcomed me in, I was no longer just a student or a waitress. I was someone who was being taken seriously. My opinion mattered. The validation was both exhilarating and humbling. I'd spent so much time doubting myself, wondering if I was good enough, if I could actually make a difference in the field. But now, I was seeing the real impact of my work. As my role in Prescott's collection grew, so did my confidence. I was soon leading my own investigations into suspected forgeries, and even though each case came with its own set of challenges, I found myself relishing the problem-solving aspect of it. There was something about finding the truth beneath the surface that felt like a puzzle I had been preparing for my whole life. Each discovery, each verification, felt like a triumph, not just for me, but for my grandfather, whose legacy I was now able to restore in ways I never thought possible. Then came the day I got a call that would change everything. It was from Prescott's assistant telling me he wanted to meet with me in person. My heart raced as I wondered what this could be about. Was there a new project, a new opportunity, or something else entirely? When I arrived at his office, Prescott was waiting for me with a serious expression on his face. He gestured for me to sit down, and after a brief silence, he spoke. "Emily, I've been reviewing your work over the past few months," he began. "Your dedication, your eye for detail, it's rare. I've been considering a new position for you, something more permanent. I want you to head up a new department I'm establishing within the foundation." I sat in stunned silence, processing what he had said. Head up a department? Was this real? "You'll be in charge of a team focused on art forgery prevention and education," he continued. "You'll be mentoring young scholars, creating programs, and leading initiatives that will change how the art world handles authentication moving forward." My mind spun as I absorbed the magnitude of what he was offering. Not just a job, but an opportunity to lead, to shape the future of art history and preservation, to make my grandfather proud. "Of course," I managed to say, my voice shaky but resolute. "I'd be honored." It felt surreal. Less than a year ago, I had been struggling to keep up with my schoolwork, unsure of my future, and now I was being given the chance to define that future. Everything had changed, and for the first time in my life, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. The next few months were a whirlwind of change and growth. I couldn't help but marvel at how far I had come in such a short time. I went from working as a waitress at Lorraine's Bistro, barely scraping by, to heading up a department at one of the most prestigious art collections in the world. It was everything I had dreamed of and more, but the pressure of the position weighed heavily on me every day. Leading a team, making decisions that could shape the future of art authentication. There were moments when I wondered if I was truly ready for all of it. But I reminded myself that I wasn't alone. I had Prescott's support, and I had my grandfather's legacy to guide me. I spent my days meeting with scholars, reviewing manuscripts, and leading workshops on art forgery prevention. We developed programs to teach young historians how to spot forgeries, and I began building partnerships with museums and galleries to establish better practices for authentication. It felt like a dream come true, like I was finally making a real difference in the world. But it was also exhausting. There were days when I stayed up late, poring over documents, questioning every detail, making sure that nothing slipped through the cracks. The responsibility was overwhelming at times, but it was a responsibility I took on willingly, knowing that my grandfather had faced similar challenges throughout his career. One of the most fulfilling parts of my new role was mentoring the next generation of scholars. I had always admired the work of those who came before me, and now I had the chance to pass on what I had learned to others. I spent hours in lectures explaining the intricate details of art forgery, breaking down the methods for detecting counterfeit manuscripts. The students were eager, hungry for knowledge, and it reminded me of my own journey, the uncertainty, the ambition, and the drive to prove myself. I often found myself thinking back to my days as a graduate student and how I would have felt to have someone like me in my corner, offering guidance and insight. It was one of the most rewarding parts of my job. But the real test came when we were presented with a case that would change everything. A high-profile manuscript had been brought to our attention, one that was said to have been lost for centuries, and one that Prescott was deeply interested in acquiring. The manuscript was a masterpiece, with intricate illustrations and a provenance that traced back to a royal family. It was priceless, and Prescott was determined to add it to his collection. But as soon as I saw it, I knew something was wrong. The paper didn't feel right. The ink wasn't aged the way it should be. The details in the illustrations were too crisp, too modern. I didn't need to look closely to see that it was a forgery. But I also knew that proving it would be a challenge. This wasn't just any manuscript. It was a work of incredible historical importance. And if I was wrong, it could cost Prescott millions. I spent days analyzing the manuscript, working with my team, cross-referencing historical records, and running tests in the lab. I knew the stakes were higher than ever. But there was something in me that kept pushing forward. I couldn't let myself back down now. I couldn't let another forger get away with destroying history. The pressure mounted, but so did my determination. My grandfather's voice echoed in my mind. The truth must always be protected. I had learned to trust my instincts, and they were telling me the same thing they had told me all those months ago. The manuscript was a fake. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the test came back. The manuscript was indeed a forgery, the ink, the paper, the illustrations, all modern. Prescott was shocked, but he was also grateful. He thanked me for my diligence, for not backing down, and for preserving the integrity of the collection. In that moment, I felt like I had truly earned my place. I had not only proven my worth in this world, but had helped to protect the very thing I had spent my life studying, art and history. As I stood in Prescott's office, watching the team prepare to remove the manuscript from the collection, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of pride. My grandfather's legacy had led me here, and in that moment, I knew I had honored it in the best way possible. A few weeks after the forgery discovery, I found myself sitting in Prescott's office once again. This time, the room felt different. The weight of what I had accomplished, the manuscript, the case, the knowledge that I had upheld my grandfather's legacy, still lingered, but there was a sense of quiet satisfaction in the air. Prescott had called me in for what I assumed was another routine meeting, but when I entered the room, I could sense that something was different. He was sitting at his desk, papers spread out in front of him, his expression focused. "Emily," he said without looking up, "thank you for coming. Please, sit down." I sat, trying to read his face, but it was hard to gauge what he was thinking. "We've been talking," Prescott continued, finally meeting my eyes, "about how we move forward, how we continue to push the boundaries of what we do here at the Foundation." I nodded, still unsure of where this was headed. Prescott's office had always been a space of power, of decisions being made that affected the art world, and I had been a part of that. But now there was something in the air that made me feel like I was being brought into something even bigger. "You've proven yourself, Emily," he said, his voice steady. "More than I ever expected. You've not only led some of the most critical forgeries, but you've also built a foundation for the next generation of art historians. Your work is invaluable, and your approach, focused, patient, and grounded in the principles of truth, has impressed everyone here." I felt a rush of warmth spread through me at his praise, but I kept my face neutral. I had always been uncomfortable with compliments. I didn't do this work for recognition. It was for the truth, for my grandfather, for the art. Which is why I want to offer you something, Prescott said, breaking through my thoughts. I've been thinking about the future of this department and the foundation. It's time to take it to the next level, and I believe you're the right person to do it. My heart started to race. What do you mean? I want you to take on a larger role, head of the authentication department. You'll oversee not just the current projects we have, but help build a new initiative for young scholars. It'll be more than just academic work. We want to create a space where authenticators can work directly with galleries and museums, and even the public, to educate about forgeries. It's time to change how the art world thinks about authentication. I sat back in my chair, my mind struggling to keep up. Head of the authentication department? I couldn't believe it. This was the kind of role I had imagined for myself in my dreams, but never actually thought I'd have the chance to pursue. I don't know what to say, I stammered, feeling my pulse quicken. I never imagined. You don't need to say anything yet, Prescott interrupted, his voice calm but insistent. I know it's a lot. Take some time to think about it. But I believe you're ready for this, Emily. I wouldn't offer it to anyone else. I took a deep breath, absorbing the enormity of what he was saying. This wasn't just a job. It was an opportunity to shape the future of the art world, to carry on the work my grandfather had started. This was my chance to take everything I had learned, everything I had worked for, and build something lasting. I had always known I wanted to make a difference in the world of art, but now it was real. It was happening. After a long silence, I looked at Prescott, my voice steady despite the whirlwind inside me. Yes, I'll do it. I'm ready. He smiled, his eyes glinting with approval. I knew you would be. As I left his office, a sense of calm washed over me. This was my new beginning. And as I walked out into the hallway, I thought about my grandfather again. He had spent his life fighting for what was right, exposing forgeries and protecting the truth. Now I would carry that fight forward. This was only the beginning of my journey. It had been a few months since I accepted the position as head of the authentication department, and every day felt like a whirlwind of new challenges and responsibilities. The department was growing, and so was I. I had quickly found myself leading a team of young scholars, each eager to learn the art of spotting forgeries, and working closely with museums and galleries on projects that would reshape how the art world approached authentication. It was a dream come true, one I had worked for my entire life. But with this new role came new pressures, and the weight of my grandfather's legacy was never far from my mind. The pressure came from all sides, not just the expectations within the foundation, but the pressure I placed on myself. I had spent so many years studying art history, learning from my grandfather's research on forgeries, and dreaming of making a real impact. Now, I was at the center of that dream, but the stakes were higher than ever before. One mistake could be disastrous. I couldn't afford to let myself fail. Every time I reviewed a manuscript or examined a painting, I felt the eyes of my grandfather on me. What would he have done? Would he be proud of the work I was doing? Despite these pressures, there were moments that made it all worth it. I was speaking at more conferences now, traveling to meet with experts from around the world, and sharing the research we were doing in the department. And the students, oh, how they inspired me. They looked up to me in ways I never thought possible. Their excitement about the work we were doing, their curiosity and hunger for knowledge, reminded me why I had chosen this path in the first place. I was no longer just a student. I was a teacher, a leader, someone who could shape the next generation of art historians. But even in the midst of all this, there were days when I still questioned myself. When I felt unsure or overwhelmed, I would return to my grandfather's notes. His meticulous research, the way he had traced every detail of a forgery, had been his lifeline. It was how he had fought against the fakes that threatened to destroy the integrity of art. I realized that, like him, I couldn't afford to be complacent. I had to push boundaries, to keep searching for the truth, no matter how difficult or inconvenient it was. One evening, as I was going through a new batch of documents that had been sent to us for authentication, I found something that made my heart stop. It was a manuscript, unassuming at first glance, but something about it caught my attention. The parchment was older than it appeared, and the ink had an unusual chemical composition. My instincts flared. I had seen these signs before in my grandfather's research. The more I examined the manuscript, the more convinced I became. It was a forgery, one that had slipped under the radar of several experts. The implications were huge. This manuscript had been on display in a major museum for years. My mind raced as I thought about the consequences. This wasn't just a small piece of art. This was a significant part of history that had been stolen from the public under the guise of authenticity. It was exactly the kind of case my grandfather had warned me about. I couldn't let it go. I knew what I had to do. I had to expose the truth, no matter what it cost. The legacy of my grandfather, the integrity of art, depended on it. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was my moment. I wasn't just a historian anymore. I was part of something bigger, a movement to protect the truth and preserve the legacy of the artists who had come before us. And with that realization, I knew I was ready. Ready to confront the forgers, ready to carry my grandfather's fight forward, and ready to honor his legacy in the only way I knew how, by standing up for what was right. Life often presents unexpected opportunities, and the key is to trust your instincts and stay true to your values, even when faced with challenges. Don't be afraid to speak up for what's right, even when it feels risky. The courage to stand by your beliefs can change your life and the lives of others. It's also essential to honor the legacies of those who have come before you, learn from their experiences, and carry their wisdom forward. Embrace your passions, stay dedicated, and never underestimate the power of perseverance in shaping the future you desire.